Okay, well, hopefully we have a few more people filter in and we get Stephanie on, but I'll just talk briefly about the General Assembly session. Um, so we have a bill that was brought to VAR from the Property Management Council. So maybe Don, you can even expand on this if needed. But we're looking at changing the time frame with which you can return the security deposit. So I guess the feedback had been that, especially in this time of real challenge of getting contractors to come in and fix any repairs, that what was it? Is it 45 days now? The security deposit has to be returned. And they're proposing extending it another 15 days to have that itemized receipts and actual damages hopefully completed. Because I guess we're having problems with judges not granting that money if you don't have something concrete to show for. Even sometimes just an estimate isn't enough. So this is sunset after a year, because we're thinking hopefully this is a temporary problem, because we're certainly not looking to screw tenants out of their security deposits. But I guess we're having situations with homes that are damaged, and the property owner is not able to get that security deposit money, which is what it's intended for, because they're having such a hard time securing contractors to come out to even look at the property, never mind actually complete the repairs. So Don, is that correct?
Yeah, that was a discussion. I think the way that's probably, if it does even go through, I think the way it's going to be is that you're going to have to show that there is a reason why you need the additional time.
Yeah.
It's not just going to be a flat out, well, now we have 60 days. It's going to be, you still have 45. If you need additional time, you're going to have some something to document the reason for that.
Yeah. Right. So this is not just for anything, but you need to have actual damages done that you are not able to get whether it's an estimate or get the work actually completed in that time frame. So the 45 days is not changing. We're not extending it to 60. We're giving people over the next year the ability to tack on 15 more days in the event you are not able to secure third-party contractors to come in and fix it.
Right. And oddly enough, that kind of times in with what we were going to discuss today too, regarding damage addendums. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, I might just also quickly roll through, because y'all, I'm sure, either sell to or are familiar with folks that do. Just a real quick thing. This is a big one potentially. I know that you all probably don't property manage short-term rentals, but we are looking at doing a short-term rental bill. This has been a huge issue for so many jurisdictions within the Commonwealth, and it has started to come to our area. As you can imagine, most of our area is a slightly less attractive vacation destination, so we don't have quite the same issues as, say, Northern Virginia being close to DC, and certainly the beach towns down in the Hampton Roads area. But we are starting to have a lot of trouble at Lake Anna. A lot of citizens making a lot of noise about short-term rentals. So it's a pretty wide-ranging bill, but basically what the attempt to do is to, at its base, is to simply exempt realtor managed properties. So if you have a property management agreement, not with just a licensee, but with a licensed realtor, because we are held to a higher standard, and if you all violate any of these things, or your clients do, you could potentially lose your license at DPOR if you are, completely ignoring the rules of real estate. So we feel like it makes sense. That's why we're exempting realtors and not just, my neighbor down the street who's renting on Airbnb, because you all are held to a different standard. So I can certainly go into a lot of that. Now, there's going to be rules they can put in, but the most egregious ones, like pure prohibitions on short-term rentals, not allowed. Making the owner live in the property, no longer allowed. Installing any sort of video surveillance or sound surveillance. I guess this has been something that Hampton Roads has looked at doing, which is terrifying on many levels. There's a lot of things in there that they're not going to be able to do. They can't go crazy with the inspections. They can't go crazy with the occupancy. And this is, again, much more for beach. really getting at the beach. I guess there's places that have 10 bedrooms, but they're capping
Yeah.
the occupancy at 6 people. So it
Right.
needs to be tied to the building code. You can't require exterior interior inspections any more than 5 years. That gets at some of those awful stories about decks that have collapsed. They've kind of swung back the other way and said they have to do annual inspections. You can't require any repairs or rehabilitation of any of the property beyond the building code. So you can't say you have to have extra XYZ just because you're a short-term rental. Same thing with additional parking. They cannot require any additional parking just because it's a short-term rental beyond what the building code says. So I guess they're looking at some pretty decent reception so far. I'm a little worried just because of our relationships with our local elected officials. The city of Fredericksburg has a very restrictive ordinance, and they can easily amend it and just say this is not applied to realtor managed properties. But they have a few of these things in their ordinance. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I think that came up, and it was I was actually pretty surprised, as the reason for it is that there's no standard, and what they're trying to get to is because all these localities had their own thing that they were doing, and some of it was just crazy. And so what they're trying to do is standardize it so that there's no extremes one way or another. So.
Right, exactly. This has been something we've thought about for years. I mean, I remember when I first started 12 years ago, we were talking about Airbnb, and it was largely, I think, in the Charlottesville area. And the state, I think, quite frankly, is just sick of hearing everybody come to them with a different issue. So they're trying to get some guardrails around, at least for our members. Another big one, if anybody sells, is they're looking at sort of completely redoing the way the resale disclosure packet is in the statute. So it's going to be an interesting change. They're trying to harmonize 3 different statutes and just have it under one. So I know this isn't as big of a deal for us because we don't have a ton of condos, but whether you're buying a condo or a single family home, it doesn't matter where your document is housed in the statute. It's all going to be under one, and they're going to change. And this is none of this is passed yet. This is proposed. They're proposing to change it from the resale disclosure packet to the certificate, which I think is going to be a big change for a lot of us. We'll call it the packet for the next 5 years. But it's going to be spelled out in the law in one place for consumers, exactly what should be in these, how long, and we're not changing any of the timeframes. No, not changing the 3-day right of rescission and the extra 7 you can agree to, not changing any of that, but having it very streamlined in the law, how the packet should be arranged. Here's what it is, so that homeowners have some consistency from property to property, and they will create a cover sheet, which I guess is what they always wanted to do, and it never worked so far, but a cover sheet that will be harmonized across every HOA, POA, COA, doesn't matter, which I think will be, this is a big deal, right? I mean, the disclosure, the property documents are a big deal. The packet's a big deal for a lot of people. It's not changing what you can put in the HOA docs. It's not covenants and restrictions. It's not changing the definition and of, an incomplete packet. I know we fight about that all the time. It's not changing any of that. It's just kind of harmonizing the way the packet is arranged, which I think will be a welcome change for a lot of agents, at least to have some consistency across associations of what they look like, what's in them. Not guaranteeing that will be complete, but at least, the sections will have to be there. The other thing they're doing is trying to add some teeth to the whole common interest community process. If your clients live in an HOA and they want to protest something in the HOA, and the HOA is required to have a review process, a complaint process, basically. And right now, if HOAs aren't following the rules, there's really no recourse. There's no, I don't want to say punishment, but there's no responsibility or accountability. This is trying to give the ombudsman at the Common Interest Community Board, which oversees HOAs, a little bit more authority to require that HOAs she is not looking at cases to review whether the HOA made the right decision or not. This is not about flying your flag or putting up a fence or storing backyard chickens. No, it's whether or not the process was properly followed to file your complaint. So that's what we'll see next year at in the General Assembly session. All this is obviously subject to change. It's still very early. The session moves very quickly, but that's what the Public Policy Committee at the state level has decided to move forward with. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dawn. Oh, I did get a response from Stephanie. She says she's going to be here very soon. So good. So Dawn, I'm just going to turn it over to you to start. You were first on my list to begin with, to talk about why and how you use damage addendums and why it might be a good thing to think about. And I will preface by saying that there's no right or wrong answer, but we thought this would be kind of fun because Dawn and Stephanie have different approaches to this, and to have them kind of share and if you will, try to convince you all which way is the better approach. But they're both valid and there is no right or wrong answer here. It's just how you choose to run your business. So Dawn, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, so, well, without Stephanie here, I think I'll slam dunk it, but I'll try and point out both sides until she does get here, and then she can jump in. We use it. I've used and not used. I've done both ways. The differences are pretty stark when there's a problem. When there's no problems, obviously these are non-issues. And if you get into a court situation where you're looking for final rents and damages, and depending on which court that is, some judges require a lot more documentation than others. Chip Dix is surprisingly, I don't always agree with his methods, but he always has a reason for his opinion on those. He's a big fan of them because it basically takes away the opportunity for the judge to make a decision on whether something is a valid charge or not. One of the things that's good about it is you can put anything in there you want. And if it's part of the lease as an addendum, if they sign it, then they're agreeing to that. And there's no legislation that dictates what the cost of painting a wall in a room is, or whether you have to, what the cost of the cleaning of appliances is, or, something along those lines. Whereas if you don't have something like that, the judge can just say, well, how old was this paint? And if you say it was 7 years old, but in really good shape, the judge is going to say, well, it's 7 years old. The paint is dead. You would have had to have repainted anyway. And there's even a HUD guidelines for that. And I think paint is 5 and carpet is 7, or those are mixed up. But and a lot of the judges will use a kind of a schedule like that when they make a decision. So we've all run into that where maybe the carpet wasn't new, but it wasn't in bad shape, and maybe one room was damaged carpet and one wasn't, and so you're kind of prorating what the either repair or replacement cost charged to the tenant is. If you have a damage addendum, and you don't have to cover everything in it, but if you cover the maybe 20, 25 things that just come up constantly, the rest of it you can kind of fill in as needed, and it becomes less of a hassle if you ever do get in front of a judge. They can see right there, okay, well, they signed that if you had to repaint this room, this is what it's going to cost. And so it's a lot different. And oddly enough, I was in Spotsy Court yesterday, and I hadn't been in Spotsylvania Court since before the COVID. So it was eye-opening again. I had forgotten what that court was like, where they throw you in with everything. It's some business transactions that went crazy. It's UDs. It's just a mix of everything. And so you kind of watch what's going on and listen to it. And it's like, oh my God, why didn't that person get an attorney? Why didn't that person get an attorney? And they're talking about big money sometimes. And it's kind of surprising, but the judge there, I had not been in front of before, and I don't remember her name, but she was very thorough about, and for every single person that went up there and she made a judgment on the case, she actually told the tenant exactly what was happening and what was going to happen if they did this or didn't do this. And that was the first time I had seen a judge in any court that had done that. And I thought it was really good. I think it was a little surprising when they were told that. But at that point, the case was closed. It was already adjudicated. So, but usually you just kind of go through there in a whirlwind. I don't know how she would judge certain charges, how she would deem those to be acceptable or not. But that's part of the reason why you would want to have a damage addendum, because you don't want the judge's opinion to enter into it. You want to have as much of that as possible already done. So basically all they're doing is saying, yep, you agreed to this, you agreed to this, you agreed to this. There's nothing I can do. You agreed to pay this if this was done. So it takes it out of the judge's hands.
Don, can you maybe point to a real example where this has been beneficial to your business, where you've had somebody where you've gone and been able to say, I've used it and I've collected, whereas I know can't prove a counterfactual, but
yeah, now we just talked about it a little bit ago, where it's hard to get some work done sometimes. And if you don't have to worry about that, you can just charge out the tenant, be done, their security deposit, their disposition is done. You don't have to even, you don't have to wait till the end of the clock even. And that way you can get the owner their money quicker. And you've already taken that part of the deposit. And you can back it up if you go to court. So I think it's a time saver in certain situations. Obviously, I'm not talking about creating something that has you try and come up with every single possible, scenario of what can be damaged, because that list is infinity. You'd never come up with it, right? But most of us probably have, honestly, about 20 things that come up, and honestly it's 10 of them are the most frequent, and after that it drops off. But as long as you're covering kind of the more frequent and more important aspects of it, I think it can really save you a lot of time, a lot of effort, and then also covers you if you do have to go to court for final rents because they're contesting the charges.
So where does one come up with these numbers from? So if I'm a tenant, say, where'd you get this from?
Yeah, so there's a number of places. I didn't even realize that. I think the Virginia Realtor site actually has a document with that stuff on it. I didn't realize that until the PMX that existed, but apparently that does. I don't know what's on it. If you look at many property management sites, not just in Virginia, but really if you just kind of search those out, a lot of them will have those that are listed as part of their leasing documents. There's a number of places to get them. Now for us, it's always an estimate, right? But you're always trying to estimate high and within reason. I mean, we kind of know what the pricing is, but then again, I've been pretty shocked at some of the things that have come up lately with pricing. So, when it comes to appliances or even painting has gotten crazy expensive. And it's not because the price of paint has gone up so much. It's just because painters have gotten a lot more expensive. So, we'll put for example, if we have to paint a wall, and I'm just going to throw this out there. I don't know what the number is. It's just generic, but if we're going to paint a wall, we can say $250 and we'll put a plus next to it. So that's the minimum that it's going to be is $250. And so you can do that with a number of things because, it might depend on the area of where the house is located, how big the room or wall is. I mean, there's a number of variables. So, but that covers it. And then they're signing that as part of their lease. And so they're agreeing to pay that kind of stuff. You can put cleaning appliances individually, or, whole house cleaning, or windows are frequently come up. Broken blinds, that's always a thing. There's always light bulbs, filters, the usual kind of things that come up in a damage situation. So
So John, I don't have numbers, but this is I'm going to share my screen really quick. This is the addendum I quickly found on the VAR
Oh, yeah.
website. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you see they list just general-ish things. Now, I mean, I don't know if somebody would want to use this as an absolute and total, but it's more like probably a guide that you'd want to tweak based on your own kind of experience. So
Yeah, it's pretty clear up front. This is legally
yeah,
binding. If you don't
yep,
understand it doesn't matter.
that's right.
Okay.
And I've never gotten any pushback from anyone who signed it. No one's ever said, "Oh my God, I can't believe you're going to charge me that," and because they all think, of course, going into a tenancy that they're not going to have any damage, even though they've probably had damage charged to them in the past. They're habitual damagers.
This time will be different. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and we understand that things happen, even good tenants have things happen. Yeah. My daughter ran into the corner of a wall and busted that like metal bar running away from her brother. It happens. So
yeah,
to the best of us. So any questions for Don before we move on? How he uses it? Go ahead, Michelle. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
I have a question. You made a comment about that if you didn't have the work done, you were still able to move forward with giving the owner the money. That kind of did a trigger to me because in order to charge, you have to have performed. So if you haven't performed the service, how did you deduct from the tenant unless you were doing like an estimated security deposit disbursement?
Well, you're still gonna get the damage done. So you're not going to charge for damage that wasn't done, right? So for instance, in Kim's situation where there's a hole in a wall, let's say for some reason you couldn't get that work completed within 45 days, you still have charged it out. You still can get the work done for the next however long it takes to get the work done before you go to court.
So it would be like an estimated security deposit because a tenant has a right to have all receipts when they go, have a right to receive receipts.
No, they don't.
Especially if they're disputing the charges prior to going to court.
I would never provide receipts to a tenant. I'm under no obligation to do that at all.
Yes, you are.
No.
Yeah, you're required to provide the receipts if requested by a tenant, so they can see the actual cost damage.
Estimate. Well, they've already signed the damage addendum.
Yes, but the damage addendum also says it can be a range. So for instance, like we have an estimated clause in our lease of what estimated cost can be, but it has a thing, this is the minimum. So, and it says it can vary cost, labor, etc. However, like we get our security deposits done within 30 days, no matter what. So, we don't try to wait till the 45 days or anything like that. Our 45 days is that like little grace period time if we are waiting on an invoice. But if a tenant disputes and requests to see a receipt, we have to, sorry, my dogs are barking now, of course. The tenant has a legal right to see the bill, the actual invoice to prove that the work was performed.
So I think in court, yes. So if it's disputed and you're going to court to argue final rents and damages, at that point, the judge is going to ask for copies of those receipts, correct?
But if a tenant disputes the security deposit before filing in court and asks to see the invoices, you have to provide those to them to show where the funds went.
I don't think you do. I mean, I don't know, but first of all, that's not happened to me. But secondly, I don't think you'd have to provide that to anyone other than a judge.
Give me a second, I'll research it.
Yeah, I'm looking. I have my law book here. I'm checking it. I know what you're talking about, and I'll find the exact law for you.
Okay. Yeah, because in order to deduct, you must perform and if you're not completed, then it's where you send the notice of deductions to the tenant that this is going to be deducted. And then you have to send the final disbursement. And if there's any, you didn't charge all of it, or you didn't utilize all the money, then you have to reimburse the tenant for the difference. The only reason why I'm doing this, saying this, is I'm writing a policy on it right now. So that's why I was like, it piqued my interest. So,
Well, did you look at the VRLTA to find that?
It is in the VRLTA. I'm getting ready to send you guys a link.
What's the number?
55.1-1226.
Yeah, so I'm reading in subsection E, the landlord shall notify the tenant in writing of any deductions provided by this section to be made from the tenant security deposit during the course of the tenancy.
right.
That's
yeah.
different.
It's
Yeah,
different.
yeah. That's if you're using
Under
deposit funds to
subsection-
pay something
under
while they're
subsection
there.
F, it says maintain itemized records under this, the landlord. Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on one second.
So that's not what we're talking about. It's not the
The
same
tenant-
thing.
The tenant, his authorized agent or attorney must be allowed to inspect the records of deductions applicable to the tenant at any time during normal business hours.
Some weird writing.
Yeah, so like our files that we keep on a tenant or even an owner, if the tenant requests to see it, even our little notes and stuff, you have to legally be able to share that file. So that's why you have to be careful what you put in a tenant's file. You know, you can't
Yeah.
sit there and say tenant's a jerk and have it in writing and share the file and it's sitting there.
You don't have to proactively send them the receipts if they're not asking for them, but they do have to be made available.
Correct.
Right,
That what we're
if
saying?
requested. So if a
If
tenant disputes
requested.
their security deposit, when they get their notice and says, I would like you to provide me the receipts, and if this work hasn't been performed, you have no receipts to provide. That's where I was coming in with my question, is he had said, you know, up until court, then they have up until court to complete, but technically we have our certain amount of days to complete. And then there's the extension time period if it lasts longer, and if the tenant disputes that, then and wants to see the invoices, because some tenants think we're taking a cut off at the top, you know, and they're
course.
getting extra charges. If we provide them the invoice, that shuts everything down pretty much, and you don't end up in court 90% of the time. You're showing them this is an independent contractor, this contractor is doing this work, and this was their cost. So that's what the tenants are wanting to see most of the time when they request to see the invoices, is that we're not putting an additional charge to it.
Does that happen a lot?
Well, I do multiple states. So in Northern Virginia, I have seen it where tenants sit there, and I went to court during COVID, believe it or not. I went to court in Fairfax for a tenant disputing
Wow,
nail holes.
Fairfax.
Yeah, in Fairfax. And Fairfax is a very hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we went to court, we went to trial on nail holes that he was charged for over 3 millimeters, and he was charged over 3 millimeters size wise, because anything above normal wear and tear is 3 millimeter under normal wear and tear is 3 millimeters and below, above is 3 millimeters and up. Believe it or not, it is a note there. It's out there somewhere. I think it's under HUD. So we went to court. He was disputing the nail holes charges because he had like 5 anchors like all through, and it had to be painted corner to corner and stuff like that. So he was disputing that charge, and he only lived in the house 1 year. So he was getting charged for the actual labor to repair the holes. Basically he was trying to argue with me about it, and the judge finally shut him down. He's like, she was right. It was over 3 millimeters. It's an excessive above normal wear and tear, and judgment was dismissed against us, or against the owner. So it's so tenants dispute, but even then he was trying to say that the vendor jacked up the prices, to say that we even had the vendor come in and testify. It, you know, tenants dispute everything under the sun. It doesn't matter what it is. A light bulb, I mean, so we always go on the defenses when we're doing these charges and we're assessing if we're getting to disperse. Can we, if we went to court, would it be held up? Because that's our thought process. How much will we have to fight this? If we don't have anything to back our charges, and owners, they like to do the repairs sometimes themselves, and then want to charge labor and everything else because it's their time, and they can't. They can charge material, but not their labor to work on their own house. So that will get run out by a judge quick.
Yeah.
I
had one that did that too.
One of the reasons why I joined this is right now I'm doing a process on security deposits for my company. So it's so I was kind of curious on how, because we do have your addendum, not an addendum, it's built into our lease about what the estimated costs could be for certain things. I think it's like a page long. But I also believe in Stephanie's method too. So I'm kind of curious on how it rolls. I'll be quiet.
Well, that seems to be a great segue. Don, thank you so much for that. It's great information. This is a great conversation. So thank you for doing that. And
yeah, it's funny that like at PMX, first of all, it was not realtor focused. It was property management focused. And if nobody's ever been to it, I would highly recommend going to it, because it might be the same classes you're taking, but the focus is on property management. And then the Q&A afterward is legit property manager Q&A and not mixed in with a bunch of, realtor sales stuff. So I think it was really good.
Yeah, great plug. So we actually have several people from FAAR who sit on the Property Management Council, and I'm sure probably take advantage of PMX, and a lot of great information that gets shared there. So Stephanie's also on the Property Management Council, if I'm not mistaken. So she is going to argue the flip side of why she does not use a damage addendum. So Stephanie, thanks for joining us. Take it away.
Morning, everyone. Sorry, I was a little bit late. Unfortunately, our schedules don't always run with our calendars. So yeah, excited to discuss the flip side of this. So previously I did use a damage addendum. However, I found that it takes a lot of time to maintain accurate numbers. And sometimes we had tenants who, lived there for numerous years and the numbers were outdated. And then, you're then roped into a certain number that you put on your damage addendum, and that tenant may have been there for, 5 years, and that those amounts no longer apply. It's much more expensive, this year than it was to get something done 2 years ago even. So basically, I am a huge advocate for having the most thorough inspections. And that to me speaks volumes to a judge. And I actually just had a case on Tuesday where we had a very thorough move-in inspection. We had an extremely thorough move-out inspection with many, many photos. And, obviously we had, the receipts, but the judge never even asked for the receipts because they looked at the 2 inspections and said, it's clear what you're charging for. And it was over $5,000 in damages. So I'm a huge advocate for having those inspection reports on the front and the back side, because I feel like, photos speak 1,000 words. And when you have the documentation to prove what you're charging for, as well as the receipts for the repairs, it's really difficult to argue that. Now, I have had some judges who have said, I think that price is a little bit high or whatever, usually due to the length of their tenancy. So a lot of times they'll say, well, it's a little high because they were lived there for 5 years, or 4 years, and you're charging them for the full paint. And it's like, yeah, but they also damaged all the walls and, caused excessive, extreme damages. So, and then in that case, the judge may lower the amount, but then I can take that back to the property owner and say, well, it was the judge's decision that you can't charge them for the full amount. But we did try to collect for you, but unfortunately the judge, decided that wasn't reasonable based on the time of tenancy. So anyway, that's basically how I do it. I no longer use a damage addendum. I think the lease and the VRLTA are pretty clear as far as the tenant's obligations of moving out. We do send them move out instructions prior to them moving out with a checklist that says what they need to do. And it is also in their lease that they have to have, you know, the carpets professionally cleaned and all the things. So it's already agreed upon what their obligations are. Any questions?
Yeah, I do think it's important, like you said, the addendum becoming outdated as far as pricing. And of course, that can be 6 months ago too, not even 5 years ago, but that's something. And then we do have to constantly update that on a yearly basis. But, you know, during COVID, I mean, who knows? So the get around to that is that our bigger ticket item, I mean, a light bulb's always a light bulb. We're always going to charge what we charge for that probably. But things like, you know, paint and carpeting, the bigger ticket stuff and repair walls and floors and stuff like that. We always have a plus next to it. And that kind of accounts for that kind of increase in pricing over time. But yeah, I agree. That's always an issue. And you never know when you get in front of the wrong judge on the wrong day, what they're going to say. But that's also kind of the rarity too, right? I mean, for Michelle, I don't know how often you end up in court because of a tenant taking you to court as opposed to you the other way, right? That's a little bit unusual.
So to be honest with you, in my 10 years here for a security deposit dispute, I've only been to court once.
Yeah.
And that was during COVID. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
and Fairfax. Yeah.
Yeah, because we're very very detailed. And again, it follows back to like what Stephanie was saying in regards to the detailed move in and move out inspection. Because when we're doing our inspections, we're looking at like move in, move out, interim inspections that we do, and any maintenance that was put in during tenancy. So yeah. I mean, back in the day, like years ago when I was with a different company, yeah, we ended up in court with security deposit disputes all the time. But I think the tighter you make your reign in regards to your inspections and stuff like that, the slimmer the chances are going to court where the tenant is taking you to court.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. 100%. It's a very rare occasion, I think, for most of us, because I think a lot of landlords, and I saw this yesterday, they have no idea what they need to document when they go to court. So they didn't do a move in or a move out, and they're going there just basically pleading for the right thing to do from the judge, which is not a good position to be in. You want the law to be the decider, not a person. And I think by having good move-ins, move-outs with a professional property management, that tends to at least solve that problem. So
I also have what we call a final review. So if any tenant contacts us and says, I disagree with this, which, believe it or not, happens quite frequently. I can't imagine why they would disagree, but you know, they do. So we have sort of the next step process, like before it escalates to something worse. And I literally have like a template email that says we do not discuss this and verbally, like we understand that you disagree with it. But we do have a process for the final review of your security deposit. And then you just need to complete this form that basically says what you're disputing and why, and provide any documentation you want. So basically they're pleading their case, like why they shouldn't be charged for that. And you can provide pictures, whatever you want. So then on that form, it says, once this is submitted in writing, we do not accept it any other way. Once it's submitted in writing, it will be submitted to our review board, which is the property owner and myself, but it will be submitted to our review board, and you will receive a response in writing within 15 days, business days. And then it says at the bottom, please note that once you receive this written response, that is the final decision based on what we have documented. So then, we get that information from them. Sometimes they have valid points and sometimes they don't. But when we get that, then I have the opportunity to provide all my documentation. So I do my counter and send both of them to the owner. So here's what the tenant disputed. Here's my counter. And here's all of our documentation. And I send it to the owner. And then the owner says, you know, I don't agree to refund anything else. So then I do the written response to them. Or the owner might say, I agree, you know, they tried to do blah, blah, blah. They provided pictures. So let's refund them an additional whatever amount. And then at that point, it's done. There's no more discussion on that. If they want to do anything else, they have to take us to court. And that, I think, like Michelle, I've had that happen like one time.
And we have the same type of process too. If they're going to do a dispute, it needs to be formally submitted in writing what they're disputing, why they're disputing it, and everything. And we do the same thing, present it to the owner with what we have, they have, and either the owner will reimburse or the owner will say no. And it makes it clean from there. And you also know what the tenant is working with when it comes to when you do go to court.
Yeah.
If they do take it that far, sometime by the time they get responses, 90% of the time, they'll back down. So
Especially if you have documentation. If you have documentation, like I screenshot the pictures and like circle, here's where the wall was painted with a different sheen of paint.
yeah,
So therefore we had to paint the walls. Like that's not the owner's fault that you decided to use glossy paint on flat paint, you know? So I think once it's clearly pointed out to them, like it tends to make them back down a little bit.
Okay, so any final questions on damage addendums? Okay, so I wanted this to be fun, so let's see if it works. This is the first time I've ever done this. I'm launching a poll so you guys can say, yes, I would use it, no, I wouldn't, or maybe I'm not sure. So don't be shy. This is not, we're not going to publish them and say Don lost or Stephanie lost. I just thought it would be fun to do.
We're
And
all
I've never done one
winners.
of these. I've never done one of these before, so y'all are my guinea pigs.
That's cool to use
I-
those tools, so I like it.
Yeah. All
I
right.
did that. Yeah, Laura Farley started using those in her class.
Okay, so I think you can see the results, I think. So we've got no, maybe, and no, yes, and maybe are tied. So I think some of you have some thinking to do, but that was great. Thank you so much, Don and Stephanie, for doing that. That was very interesting. So now I feel like we'll just open up the floor to any other questions, comments, anything else you're dealing with. Does not have to be damage addendum related. How's the pace of unlawful detainers? Are you having a lot more than you were before? That's a stupid question because obviously we didn't have any before by law. But I'm hearing some of those whispers coming up again when I go to my nonprofit affordable housing meetings. Evictions are through the roof. Where are these people going to go? What are we going to do with them? So I was just curious for you all how, I know that it's probably a little bit of a different market than some of those folks are dealing with. You know, some apartment buildings are different than our single family homes, but are y'all seeing your eviction numbers go up? No.
I'm not. Actually, I mean, we did have, you know, a small percentage of delinquency during the whole COVID thing. And I think we had a couple that were, you know, on our RP, but those people are still tenants, you know, that we had that were able to get the assistance that they needed during that time period. And yeah, I've only had one, and that was just due to, you know, a tenant who just refused to do the right thing. So other than that, I mean, I think that rent assistance did help a lot of people, and from what I can see, you know, they've bounced back since that. So
Okay, well, that's good to hear.
Yeah. I will say this though, when I was in court listening to all that, you know, the attorneys are always first, and this is in Spotsy. And oh my God, this one attorney had, it must have been 20 plus apartment UDs that he was going through. I mean, it was all, he went up there for 2 apartment complexes. I forget where they were, and that was it. And he just went, I mean, he was up there for a good 45 minutes, and almost all of them were dismissed. He dismissed them. So why are you even cycling through these? You know, do this ahead of time. But I was a little surprised by that. The ones that did show up, every single one
pay
of
by
them.
hour.
Well, no, $150 a case. He was flat out. He goes, and this is my thing. $150. He sat there and
Wow.
made $3,000 in about an hour and a half. So good for him.
Wow.
And he didn't do any prep work, trust me, because that would have sped up the process. So he just sat there and flipped through his pages. But anyway, I think the apartments are still having issues. It looks like single family homes probably just less so. That's just based on what I saw yesterday in the courtroom.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. I do think that, people of lower income were more impacted, and that's going to hit those lower rent properties, which are going to be the apartments and those type of things. So I do think they had a much harder hit than
Yeah.
family market.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I share a story?
Of course. Go ahead.
I wanted to share a story, and it goes kind of circles back into how a tenant has a right to view our history. It's not a Virginia story, it's a Maryland story, but it's a 6-hour story in court. Well, yeah. So up in Baltimore City, a tenant disputed their security deposit, and they were stating that they didn't get their notices on time. They didn't believe in their deductions or anything. The first judge had to dismiss because her father was an agent for our company. So she had to dismiss herself, and it had to be moved to another court. And then the second judge allowed the tenant to talk. And we literally were there from 11 to 5:30 for this one hearing. Yeah, it was ridiculous. But the judge did it on purpose because she wanted to make sure that the tenant didn't sit there and say she wasn't heard. But this tenant subpoenaed her records, our accounting department, the PM, the person that did processes and procedures. And we had 5 people from our office plus an attorney for the owner that we had to sit there and defend how we knew for a fact that she got her notifications on time. In the end, after this whole court case and everything, that she lost, obviously. But it really put into perspective where a tenant can sit there and audit their file and then audit or subpoena everybody that's touched that file and get there and have them testify or be able to cross-examine. So it's very funny in the end when the judge did the ruling, and this comes with processes and procedures and not diverting and making exceptions and stuff. The judge was able to say, here is their process. This is how your account was handled. These were your deductions, and there was no foul on anybody's part, except for you didn't meet your move-out requirements, and dismiss the case. But it was very interesting. That was the first time that, and this was not, it was like pre-COVID. So it was like 3 months before COVID. But it put in perspective that, tenants can get smart and do those things. So it was very interesting on that. It was a long day.
Hey, Kim, I have a question. I don't know if we can answer it, but I was curious if anyone has built into their lease an addendum that says if you take us to court, there will be this charge, and not just I think the VRLTA allows for an administrative charge, but I'm just curious if you guys add that in, even though it's part of the VRLTA, if you add that in with a specific amount.
Yes, as an admin fee, in addition to any legal fees and costs incurred.
Yeah.
So Michelle, in your case, if you had that back then, would that apply to each person?
Well, I think it would have been a one and done, but you can't get blood from a turnip. So
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
it was just like, it was more the experience than anything else. It was just like, I had never seen anything like that, or in a court allow that. So it was very eye-opening on keeping each file clean and precise and always following the same process on timelines and stuff like that. So you can definitively go into court and say, this is our process. This is how it was handled. And this is what they were charged for, and have all the receipts and before and after and everything. Because I don't know if, like, we do before and after pictures, even with tenant turnover. So if a vendor goes out and is repairing a wall, we have the vendor take a picture of it before and we have a picture of it after it's been completed. So it's all time stamped. So if we did end up in court, we can literally document, this is what it was when they moved out on this date at this time. Vendor was there on this date, this time, and this is what it was done, it looked like when the tenant was done, and brought it back to where it was on the move-in inspection report. But yeah, so it's it helps that your supervisor is an attorney, so it, you know, she thinks legality all the time and everything. So it's very interesting when you take it in and you're like looking towards the future in regards to what could happen. 90% of the time, everything gets shut down. I mean, before it never makes it even to court. So
Sure.
Yeah, and it's all about documentation.
Do you use a Z inspector? What do you use?
We have a home inspection company.
Oh, okay. Because
Yeah.
the timestamp, because we were looking into Z inspector because of the whole time stamping and everything else. I'm not sure. Do you use that, Stephanie?
Yes,
Yeah, you like it, huh?
I do. I
I'm
love
So-
it.
trying to get it.
We've even removed ourselves from doing the move in and move out inspections, so it can't be disputed in court that we are being biased against the tenant at move out. So
Wow.
we don't do the documentation of the property at move out. We'll assess damages that was documented by a third party. So if a tenant really wants to get froggy, we can bring that company in, and they'll do their walkthrough with the tenant and stuff like that. They don't talk
Yeah.
damage or anything, but they will, you know, bring them in. We've never had to bring them to court. So except for the one time with the tenant in the 3mm holes. So yeah. But yeah, so
Did you take a picture of measuring each hole?
no, it was obvious when the holes were like this big.
Oh, they were
And the
like
judge
TV
knew
mounts.
what 3mm looked like. I mean, he ripped his anchors out. Like he triple anchored something
Right.
in a row and then pulled them all out, which left a huge hole in like 4 different areas. I don't know what his concept was on it, but yeah. But yeah, even the landlord ended up having to be there, but she was there remotely by phone. The courts called her in. It was a very interesting case. It's never dull in property management.
Never dull in Fairfax for sure.
No. It's been quiet in Spotsylvania, Stafford, and stuff like that, but the other areas and stuff, it's always something exciting going on there.
Yeah.
Well, great conversation, y'all. Certainly don't want to shut it down. If you have more questions, this is wonderful. I will note that we are working on our agenda for 2023. Our first meeting is scheduled to be Friday, February 10th. We are still working on a speaker for that one, but I will send out a save the date as soon as we can confirm that. We have another great set of classes and these kind of meetings for next year. So we hope to see you there. Any final questions or comments before we break? Well, Don, Stephanie, thank you so much for humoring me this morning and doing this fun sort of debate style meeting. It was great discussion. I loved all the stuff we talked about, and we will be back with you all in 2023. So Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year. I look forward to seeing everyone in the new year. I can't believe we're saying that. It feels like it's year went by so fast. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.